Today on Mining America, I'll be using a rotary tool to expose the precious opal layer inside of this really nice specimen that I found when I was at the Spencer opal mine on my first time recording there. As you can see, there's some really nice color, and it's running underneath this silica layer on top. There's some more color running in here and some down there. And there's another pool right here that I'm expecting to have the same color that is right here. So we're going to get to that right after this. So today I'm going to be carving on this really nice opal that I have, and I'm also going to be glazing it. And what I'm going to be using to glaze it is a two-part silica epoxy. And there are a couple of different brands of this. You can get them at almost any hardware store. You can also get them online at a lot of different places. What's really cool about this type of epoxy though is that it's water-based, and you can clean your tools and everything with soap and water. That's one thing that I really like about it. The other thing that I really like about it is it goes on thick, and it's like a whole bunch of glazes, and it's super glossy. I mean, it's like super glossy. So it's like a bunch of layers, and it's a really glossy coat. So right after we get done grinding and carving on this, we're going to carve it down to about a 600 grit, and then after the 600 grit, I'm going to go ahead and show you how we glaze it. I'm going to start off using these 40 to 80 grit sintered burrs. They are 3/32 shank. And I'm going to use this just for the very top layer. As soon as I start to get to just little glints of color, I'm going to stop using this, and I'm going to move on to the next burr. Now I have a relatively fast drip going because I want to make sure that I keep the opal cool. I don't want it shattering because opal is very heat sensitive. So if I don't keep the opal cool enough, or if I let it heat up too quickly, it'll end up shattering. And what I want to do is I'm going to start by taking off just this little area right here and try and get to that beautiful color that's underneath right there. I don't think you guys can see the color right now, but you will at the end, I promise you. So here we go. And what I'm going to do is just really lightly, I'm going to go to some of the biggest areas that are sitting on top, and I'm just going to go ahead and run my real rough grit burr over that really lightly in circular motions, taking that down to the flat of the rest of it. And I mean, it's just going right through this. It's eating right through that little knobby that was on top right there. And I'm going through that hoping that it's not just rock that's sticking up through the actual opal layer, and that there's color underneath of it. That's what I'm hoping for. And now that area is not flat, it's still indented or still raised up a little bit, but I'm going to work it and work around the area, try and get everything to just sort of start showing color all at the same time, being real nice. And really, from what I can tell of this piece, is that the color is here, and that this really white doesn't have the really pretty glassy glitter opalescence in it, the color in it. And so I need to get below that. So I'm not too worried as long as I'm seeing that really white, because I mean, it's really white. And I'm not using too much pressure either. I'm really just running this thing over it really lightly. This grit is really abrasive. It will tear into this stuff if I go putting too much pressure. And that's not what I want. I don't want it to tear into it. I want to just lightly take it away until I start seeing color. I'm starting to see some on the edge over here. I still got a little bit of white to get through, but I'll leave a little bit of white there and take it off with my other grits. And I tell you what, I am inside of a garage right now, and it's like 10 p.m. at night, and it is hot as Hades up in here, boy. I tell you what, man. Like, it is muggy and burning up, and I thought that, like, waiting out until sun was gone down, I was hoping everything would cool out a little bit, and that's just not the way that it turned out for me at all. Got to be real patient when you're working with a rough grit like this, because you can just tear into what you don't quite want to tear into. Now I would like to have some 220 grit or some 120 grit, but I don't at the moment. I ran out of those burrs, and so what I'm holding here are some 600 grit, and I'm pretty much just going to jump from a really rough grit to a 600 grit and then take my time with the 600 grit and then move on from there. Alright, now I got my 600 grit on here, and I wish you could see all the pretty colors that are showing up in this thing, because it's definitely got pretty colors showing up all in here, and it's got pretty colors showing up all in here, and we're going to make this thing rock here in not too long. Get my fast drip going. Get my rotary tool going. Make sure we're in camera shot. And right here, I'm going to do the same thing I was doing earlier. I'm moving circles. I'm not using a lot of pressure. I'm going over the areas that I want. I want to make sure that I keep that water flowing on there a lot. Like, I want to keep that water going directly on there. That water is what's keeping the opal from cracking and shattering apart from the heat of the sanding and the burr. That color is starting to show up really nicely. I worked this opal for about 20 minutes with a 600 grit burr in order to get all the scratches out of it that I had left with the 40 to 80 grit, and also to get the proper amount of shine out of the opal. 600 grit ends up being perfect if you want to glaze your opal with a silica epoxy the way that I'm going to be doing. If you don't want to use a silica epoxy, you can just keep using the steps that I've used here and just keep going with a 1200 or a diamond paste and polishes and stuff like that. I'll get into that stuff in another video. But for this video, I'm going to glaze this, and a 600 grit ends up working perfect because the epoxy can really attach good to a 600 grit sanding job, and it will give it a really nice shine and show off the color that's below it. If you use a 1200, the epoxy just won't stick. Now, as soon as I'm done with the sanding process, I want to put my opals somewhere nice and warm and let them dry for a day. I want them to be completely dry because the epoxy that I'm going to be putting on them is a water-based epoxy. Alright, so here's our big piece, and it has been sanded down using a 600 grit burr. You can still see the nice, real clear, crystally, or I'm sorry, the real smooth and glassy broken edge right there. I did not grind that down. I just wanted to leave that edge the way it was. All of this is down to a 600. If it's wet, you can really see it. It's sparkling majorly. And this one, I just took the top layer off, and as you can see that little flash of green right there, there's a lot more green, pink, blue and gold going on inside this that once again you can't see because it's dry. If it was wet you could see it. But the stage that I'm going to go on to now, I definitely don't want this to be wet because it will mess with the silica-based glaze epoxy that we're going to put on it. So this is ready to go for the epoxy. We're going to put that one in there, and I'm going to show you a couple more here that we're also going to put in the mix. This one turned out to be way more fantastic after I started working on it a little bit than when I first found it, and it was pretty fantastic when I first found it. You're not seeing that there's a little hint of the color. There's a nice thick pink color bar that runs right through there, and it goes right through here too. But it's really not wanting to flash for us right now for some reason. And it goes inside the VUG, as you can see, which is pretty cool. And then on top, I took my Dremel tool and I just started working this area just really lightly, and it started popping up with color all over the place. And then in that little area too, you can see the yellowish green, it's got color in it too. So this is just going to be a really good candidate for giving a glaze to, a silica glaze. This should just come out really outstanding, amazing, especially since it just sort of seemed like it was going to be cool when I first found it. This part is pretty simple. We have our resin and we have our hardener, and we want to mix equal parts, get it stirred up in about a minute, and within 10 minutes we want to have it applied to our specimens. Now this epoxy tends to be pretty thick, and when I've used it with brushes before, it didn't matter what kind of brush I used, I always ended up finding bristles inside of my finish later. So I advise not using any sort of brush that will leave bristles or break pieces off and end up leaving them in your finish. So for this purpose, all I'm doing is basically drizzling it on and using wind and blowing on it in order to make the epoxy flow the way that I want it to. Also, a little bit later, what you want to do is you want to blow on the epoxy about 10 minutes after it's been drying, where you see bubbles. You just go to where you see any bubbles that might be in the finish that have raised to the top and just lightly blow on them, and they'll pop and everything will settle out and flatten and work perfect. Now I'm going to let this glaze sit on here for about 15 minutes, and I'm going to come back in about 15 minutes and I'm going to blow on anywhere that I see bubbles and try and pop the bubbles so that we don't have any air bubbles in the glaze. I'll just hold them in my hand while I put them in here. So what I've got right here is a nice dust-free area, because if I just leave my specimens with this glaze on it out in the open air, they're definitely going to collect dust particles and stuff like that. So I got this cabinet here, a Rubbermaid cabinet, and I've got some egg crates here so that the finish, the glaze, can just keep dripping and I don't have to worry about it getting everywhere inside of here. And the egg crating sort of works good for certain specimens in the way that you can position them. I don't have a light inside here. I'm not sure how good you guys can even see inside of here. And some of these pieces got a good bit of lacquer on them. That if the egg crating sticks to the lacquer, it'll still be very easy to remove or grind off. Before I did that, I made sure I put some gloves on, because I knew I was going to be touching runny pools of silica glaze or lacquer or aristocrat or liquid glass or whatever you want to call it. So that'll be ready in about 8 to 10 hours. It's pretty humid out here, so it might even be 12. I really didn't want to wait another 12 hours to get this video uploaded and for you guys to see how great these opals will look after they've been glazed. The great thing about this glaze is that it is just as shiny and glossy when it's dry as it is when it's wet. These things are going to look great in about 12 hours, and later on this week I'll post a video showing them. I hope this video was informative and helpful. I really hope you enjoyed it. You know I love you for watching. I'll have some more videos for you soon, and I have a lot of plans in the works, and they're sort of secretive at the moment, but as soon as I can put you guys in the know, I definitely will. And at this point, I'm still planning on having another Dig with my viewers out in Blythe, California right after the new year for fire agate. Put it in your calendar, and hopefully I'll see you there. If you like what I'm doing here, make sure you hit that like button and hit that subscribe button. Go ahead and leave a comment and share any of the videos that you really appreciate. And if you'd like to help support Mining America, just check out my Patreon's page, and you can also buy something in my Etsy store and see it on the Mining America sales channel right below me. I love you for watching, and I'll see you in the dirt.